How many discounts does USAA Auto Insurance offer? Too many to say here. Multi-vehicle discount, safe driver discount, new vehicle discount, storage discount, legacy.
How many discounts will you stack up? Visit USAA.com/auto discounts. Restrictions apply.
Introducing the new Volvo XC90 with 7-seat versatility, Google built-in, and advanced safety features for all your precious cargo. The new Volvo XC90, designed for life. Visit volvocars.com/US to learn more.
For every veteran, there is a story about a calling to serve, to fight for the freedoms of the American people. And every story has a struggle, a sacrifice, and invisible wounds. Warrior Watts programs help veterans recover from PTSD and invisible wounds through exercise, nutrition, and connecting with other veteran leaders. It is estimated that 22 veterans die each day by suicide, and another 30 veterans die each day by substance abuse. These are preventable deaths. Warrior Watt is committed to fighting PTSD through fitness, nutrition, and community. Got the privilege and opportunity to support our heroes in their time of need. Will you join us and take action?
All right. Welcome back. MisFitNation. The MisFitNation show. We are a show founded by a veteran and hosted by two veterans and a military spouse. Our mission is to get people to tell their stories to the world. If you're an author, share your tips with the MisFitNation. If you're a musician or an actor, our audience need to know how they too can get into the business. Coaches, we love our coaches. Come on and share your tips with the MisFitNation to help them become better versions of themselves. If you are a corporate leader or an entrepreneur, come on and show how you did it and how hard you have fought for success. If you are a veteran, first responder, or Gold Star family, we would love to have you come on and share your story with the MisFitNation. We always have time for you. If you're feeling down, alone, or starting to see the darkness, stop. Think about those who are around you. You are not alone. You will be missed. If you feel like your problems will be a burden to those in your inner circle or feel embarrassed, dial 988. If you are a veteran, take option 1. We need you to keep pushing forward. Don't make a permanent solution to a temporary problem. If you are a new listener, welcome to the MisFitNation show. Be sure to subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast app. Also on our YouTube channel at @the_MisFitNation. Subscribe and click the bell to keep you up to date on our latest episodes and all of our news. You can also find us on Heroes Media Group and About Face Radio. Now, let's get to the show!
All right. Welcome back to the MisFitNation show, your Thursday after dinner edition. We know you have plenty of choices at night to hang out, but you're here with us, and we appreciate you being here. Those of you who don't know, we are on Reach Across America Radio now, Mondays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on the iHeartRadio network. You get to hear our lovely voices over the airways of iHeartRadio. Tonight, before we get going, we have another solemn announcement. Officer Miguel Cano, California Highway Patrol, California. End of watch Wednesday, July 2nd, 2025. Let's keep Officer Cano's family, friends, peers, and this community in your thoughts and prayers as they go through this sudden loss and this sudden change in the situation. Tonight, we have a great guest, a friend of the show, a true misfit, if I may. He's retired U.S. Air Force Major. He's dedicated mental health professional and combat veteran with a remarkable 28-year military career. He's originally from the Boogie Down Bronx. He began his service in 1993 as an E-1 Airman Basic, specializing in aerospace physiology. After completing basic and tech training in San Antonio, he went to his first assignment at Air Force Base in California. Later in his career, Major Ramos played a critical role in military freefall operations as a high-altitude airdrop mission support technician. During OEF, he flew 12 aerial combat missions, delivering essential supplies to frontline troops and humanitarian aid to Afghan refugees. We're going to stop with his bio there and let him tell what the next steps were and some of the before steps as we bring him in. So without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Steve Ramos to the show. Welcome, Dr. Steve Ramos.
I appreciate you having me, Rich. Thank you so much. And I know that it takes a little bit to recap 28 years.
Yes.
Going from an airman basic. I think I like to tell a story in terms of when I did come out of the Boogie Down Bronx, there wasn't really a lot of options. So My dad basically said, "You're going to join the military. You're going to go find the Air Force recruiter." So I did, and so first assignment was Beale. Did a few other assignments as a physiology tech, supported the U2 program. With pressure suit operations, and then we started jumping out of planes and doing high altitude airdrop support. Was able to get right into some special programs. Got to work with a couple of clandestine units as a support person with oxygen bottles at high altitude, kicking jumpers out, kicking equipment out. I didn't know where I was at times when I was first introduced to the community, but the special operations community is really special to me. Really got interested in mental health because I was intrigued by some really high performing professionals who also were enduring that didn't understand their own vulnerability when it came to their psychology. So that's sort of one of the reasons. And then I had my own journey through, a few different traumatic things. And I'm also a product of therapy myself. So some interest there. Retired in 2021 after, helping lead the mental health clinic at MacDill Air Force Base here in Tampa. And so I started a practice in 2018. It's called More Life Center for Wellness, more of a holistic center. However, we specialize in mental health outpatient. That's our foundation. We've got a couple other disciplines that we've introduced. So we pay attention to things like diet, exercise. We also do a limited amount of lifestyle nutrition coaching. So we're looking at the whole individual, but our primary goal is to meet that person. Sometimes when it's at their lowest, we don't know what to expect when they come through that door. And it does take a lot for people to make that initial call. So I appreciate what you guys are doing on the show.
Thanks, brother. And we met, of course, at a clinic in January, February, late January, early February. And you met me right as I stopped my battle with alcoholism. So right as I stopped it, in the infancy, I like to call it. So that was 3 days after my last drink, I met you. Congrats. And you told me you should probably wean into it so that you don't go through any problems. And my hard head said, no, I'm going full bore. I'm going all in. And you've just been that cheerleader in my corner since then. Great milestones. You hit 100 now, 6 months now, I guess. And it's still a ride. And it's just by having positivity from you and being able to have that connection that me and you had, both serving from 1993 on, both from the Northeast, Jersey, New York, and knowing each other's backgrounds and being able to get that comfortness and help me to stay on my journey to wellness and help others like I do here. So I appreciate you.
Sure. Interestingly enough, I like to say that myself and the therapists that work in our practice are relational people. So we actively look for things that we relate to with our clients, because that's what initially it makes people comfortable. Nothing really is more important when you enter a therapy setting than safety and trust. And if you have some commonalities, it's a little easier to establish that.
And it's very easy for us. Yes. We had everything. Except I couldn't find the Air Force recruiter. You found them. So
right.
That's the only difference we had there. The Air Force recruiter was a ghost at the time. So it was either the Army or Marines, and Marines weren't. So the Army won.
At our high school, there were Army recruiters, Army and Marine recruiters hovering around the high school. You couldn't find an Air Force recruiter.
Trying to grab people, grab the hard luck kids out of there. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
You get to see a lot of our brothers and sisters through their worst days and get them to better times. what are some of the tools and techniques that you were able to use to help them get over that hump and stay in the light, like we like to call it here?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question. I think really when it comes to, folks that have experienced traumatic events, perhaps they're involved in something in combat or they've seen things, we don't always go into those situations understanding like the detriment of what that does to our psychology. We're really good with medical injuries. I think we do a good job in our country taking care of people medically. However, it's those invisible wounds that I think go unnoticed. We come from cultures. I'm using that word in a plural sense on purpose, because most of us are born in cultures that do not encourage us to be in touch with how we're feeling. If it's dark, we don't say it's dark. If it's hard, we don't really say it's hard. We say, I got to push through this, right? And some of us leave that type of culture and go into another culture, right? Like called the Department of Defense, like choose your branch. It's the same mentality, right? It's we're going to display perseverance, passion, grit, guts, whatever we have to get the mission done. And that's really what it comes to. And there's really not a lot of time to acknowledge, how things make us feel. But I can remember, I think I was in the Air Force for 1 week, and I was on the flight line at Beale Air Force Base, and I see a U-2 taking off, and the first thing I see this airplane like is having problems, and the airplane went down, and I see a big old fireball, and I'm 1 week in the military.
Welcome.
Like, about 1 week, 2 weeks in the military. So I'm already seeing this, and I'm, really, really confused. But I think really what we have is a problem with culture and acknowledging our vulnerability psychologically. We're okay to acknowledge physical injuries. And I often like to say in jest, if you had a broken leg, would you tape it up and drag it around? You wouldn't do that, but I think we're doing a better job acknowledging that, but the stigma is alive and well. And I think that most people that have served any amount of time in the military would say that seeking care sometimes can feel punitive, like it's a bad thing.
And definitely when we were in from 93 till probably right when I retired, 2015, it definitely felt, you had that feeling that if I raised my hand and said, I can't go today, then you were put to the back of the line. You're no longer a leader. You're no longer able to be trusted with anything at that point. Mm-hmm. And that was just, like you said, the stigma. And even in 2011, when I came home from my 2010-11 deployment, I raised my hand and said, look, I need help. And they told me to put my boots on and go back and lead. That's my job. And so I did, because that's what I did at that time. Yeah. And it wasn't until way later that I finally sought help and got it. And it was after I retired.
Mm-hmm. I think that we would say, and I appreciate your efforts to get help. I think that what we face is, this system that it does look punitive, right? It looks punitive, and there's a lot of social pressure to stay away from the doc, right? And not admit that. But what I think we could do a lot better in the DoD and society in general is encourage people to get help earlier. Yeah. There's a lot of things that we could teach people from an educational standpoint regarding communication, regarding relationships, regarding several things that could actually be more preventative. So I don't think we're preventative enough. I think we got to be a little bit more preventative, but our policies sometimes prevent that. And I think we'd all agree with that, and then also the social pressure, like you're going to get called all kind of names and things the day you show up and you get on a profile. Can't carry a gun anymore, can't scuba dive, can't jump out of a plane. And those are the things that keep us as service members going. Those are the things that we look forward to. I remember, being on the Air Force parachute team. I lived to jump. I lived to, and the days I couldn't jump, I was not happy. The days that the weather was bad, I was not happy. But should I go to the dock for just about anything, they were going to ground me. So, you avoided it. You avoided it. And that coupled with the idea of we're in a culture that says you're strong enough, suck it up, drive on. And so I think that tends to put us in a place where we're neglecting a lot of what is not seen.
Right. Definitely. We got our first question. This is more of a funny question for you from my brother. Did you eat better in the Air Force or in the Bronx?
Oh man, I can't answer.
But you can throw
better. So let's talk about what better is, because
there you go.
We're talking about that Puerto Rican food that I grew up on. I mean, that was good. Yep. and the Air Force chow is good too. But yeah, I don't know, man. I might incriminate myself here.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would say the Bronx. Keep myself out of trouble.
That keeps everything happy at that point right there. You said that. Good answer. Very good answer there. I know what we've talked about this many times over the last 6 months is the help that we are getting as soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines. I see it where I work. I can see that they're trying to do the whole person approach, kind of like a mind, body, spirit kind of thing. They're trying it. They're putting it into the front units, the battalions, the brigades. Do you see that as I guess a program that can last long, or is it just something that right now they're putting over a fire?
No, I think that's something that could be sustainable. I see that as something. No one is just their mind or their body or their spirit, right? That everyone has multiple parts of them. And what we're finding out, and in our practice, what we do is we try to get an idea of what's going on with them in each of those areas, especially the physical area, because we don't know how a person's hormone levels could be affecting their mood. We don't know really what's going on with some other things. And so we'll find those things out. Sometimes hormones, I think men, especially middle-aged men, finding out that they're coming in with depressive symptoms, and some of the symptoms also kind of mirror symptoms of low testosterone, so fatigue, low libido, things like that, where you don't have any energy. And then most time if we ask them, hey, go get some blood work, they'll come back and those levels will be low. So there's a lot to that piece there. And what we are, and I think there might be a little bit of an over reliance on some of the medications. So the psychotropic medications, the SSRIs and those types of things, I think there's an over reliance on those. And I think you get more benefit from what you would get from exercise and eating the right food. So I think there's a lot of research still to be done, but I think there's plenty of research that supports that if you have a good balance in each of those areas, that you could have a successful life. I think sometimes we get into, especially if we've experienced something traumatic, we get into a little bit of rigid thinking, a little bit of black and white thinking, and we get pretty cynical. So when you introduce a new idea, what the first thing people do is they just shake their head and that's not going to work, right? I'm going to can that. I'd rather either go to the bottle or find some other poor method of coping. But I think that we're getting better. I think the education needs to be a little bit better, and I think just making people understand that being vulnerable and sharing and finding someone that you trust and sharing your story with them for your sake, really, right? That is the first step to the healing. But everything is we experience something, we take it in and we keep it to ourselves, right? Because we think that that's strength, right. But it's actually the opposite. I think it takes more strength and courage and bravery to be vulnerable, to share, and to tackle those problems head on.
Definitely. And I think we talked about this also, that at the beginning when I started the show, that was the reason I started it. After my success, being able to share my story and being able to breathe, let's get everyone else on here to share their story so they can breathe. And maybe that'll be that linchpin that gets them moving forward and say, hey, someone listened to me. I'm feeling free now. I can run forward. Yes, and I know that's what it felt like for me. And I was hoping I can do that for everyone else. And I think we're doing that here just in little pieces at a time.
Mm-hmm. What I love about this whole concept is I had I guess you'll call it displeasure, doing several standard of care reviews for like post-suicide. So we find out things about the individual. If they were in treatment, I would go to the various, through the records to kind of see what was going on with their care. And what you find is that most everyone that decides to go that route of suicide is at their loneliest they've ever been. Right. So what you're doing is building community, right? You're bringing people together, and this is a reminder that, we're not alone in this.
Right. And a guest 2 weeks ago, he said one thing he learned now: if you think about someone, text them. If you just if you're thinking about them, text them. That shows that they know that you care. 1 and 2, maybe you'll get back together and have that cup of coffee or a beer or whatever you do together and sit and talk. And that way you're both still there together and you don't have that loneliness feeling. I think that was one of the great lines I was given on the show in the last year or so. I kept it, have it written down here somewhere. So.
And that's real. I think that conviction or that feeling to do that, it gets stronger and stronger the more time goes on, and you start to get that urge. And I say, like, if you feel to do it, right? Don't think about it too long, because you won't do it. Send that text, make that call, write that letter. I have a client who said that he was going to handwrite letters to all the people he loved, because I think he's really of the mindset that, and it's accurate, like, life is very fragile. We don't really know what's coming tomorrow, right. But if you can make somebody understand how much you care about them, that they're not alone, it goes a really long way. But there's one thing about I want to talk about just PTSD for a moment, because I think that's one of the most prevalent things that we deal with. And PTSD and relationships, what I think I like to make sure that people understand is that when you experience trauma, it sort of violates your whole sense of safety and trust in the world. So whether that's childhood trauma or trauma in adulthood, it really does take your sense of safety and trust, and it's really difficult. Most of the time, you're skeptical of people. It's hard to trust them, and that is really hard to build a relationship with someone that is in that position, because they become really, really closed off. And some spouses that I talk to would say, my husband or my wife, that my wife was this way, and they went over there and they came back and they were nothing like they were. And I think that's because, right, they have an untreated psychological injury, and they're just coming home and trying to deal with it on their own.
Exactly. YouTube University can only go so far. I've been using this line a lot this week, YouTube University. That's what I've been doing for most of my health ailments is YouTube University. Just maybe make that Band-Aid myself, since getting a doctor to get me in right now is so bad because the backlog and such. I figure I have to help myself as much as possible, but you can't rely on YouTube University or Google U and get a good product on the outside. We need professionals to point us and click us in the right direction, and that connection with our brothers and sisters really helps out a lot.
Absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about childhood trauma and kind of how that impacts us as adults. I think those of us that experience any sort of childhood trauma, again, you're coming from probably an environment where you didn't get any treatment for that. And some people may even join the military, right, to escape the environment that they were in. So they maybe don't experience safety there. And so maybe the first experience with safety is their brothers and sisters in the military. And I think that's what makes our career, our culture so strong, and the relationships that we build so incredible. And I think that they are really, really strong, but it requires an intentionality to keep this going after the service. Right. I talked to a lot of folks that have gotten out, and, they sort of lose their identity. I guess I was fortunate enough to be in a field the last 10 years in the Air Force that translated directly to the civilian world, but that's not the case for everyone. Right. What does a fighter pilot do when you get to maybe go fly for the airlines? Right. But, if you're doing something very unique to the Department of Defense or, the military, some of those things don't translate, and that makes that transition that much tougher, especially if you're exiting with that same mentality of like, I got this, I can suck it up, I can do this on my own, I don't need anybody. And I can say I've been guilty of that myself, like thinking that I don't need anybody. But I've availed myself to certain services. Like eventually, I think unfortunately things, when they got bad enough, when I had my time on active duty as an officer in the clinics, I got the chance to work with alcohol, drug abuse prevention treatment program. I also worked as the mental health element chief, and then I was over family advocacy as well. So when you think about how a service member comes to our office, it's usually that somebody's making them.
Right.
Right. And unfortunately, that's because there was a DUI, there was a domestic incident, or somebody had even an example that comes to mind is like a stress-induced psychotic break, right? Because we're so resistant to getting care early. Right. That was the one time I would see them. And so my message, even while I was on an active duty, was to try to destigmatize the whole thing. But when the policies are so stringent and they support, and there is a place for that. I want to make sure I bring balance to that, because there's a place for that to say, I really shouldn't be putting weapons in some people's hands, right? If they're truly not safe. But I think that the service men and women don't trust the system enough to go get that help earlier. Because the reason this couple is having a difficult time communicating is because they don't know how to communicate as a couple. But there's people on that very base that can teach them the skills to communicate to avoid that domestic, right? There's people that can teach them, hey, if you have this many drinks, that you're going to be over the limit. Yeah, probably shouldn't try it, but that's not something that we're proactive enough, I think, about. And so I think that, and it's not to be disparaging to the military. Those are some of the things I saw objectively as I was leaving the military that were not person centered; they were system centered.
And that goes back to what we said earlier about not wanting to get that stigma. If I go ask for help because I'm having issues in the house or issues with drinking, then now I'm perceived as this, and I don't want that. So I'm not going to get the help until now. It's reactionary to get help because I have to. I got the UCMJ or I got arrested off base, and now it's mandatory for everybody for me to get this. So that's the sad truth for many of them guys and gals who get in trouble that way, is because they don't believe if they go get help, they believe if they get help, they're going to be in trouble anyway. So it goes back to exactly what you said before about punitive.
Yeah, and it's systemic because this man or woman goes and sits before their commander because they had a problem. Their commander's wearing a uniform, and they go over to my office, and they sit in front of me, and I'm also wearing a uniform. I'm not saying that all mental health providers shouldn't wear uniforms, but there doesn't look to be any distinction between that commander and myself. We're wearing the same uniform, same rank probably, and there's not really a lot of trust here,
right?
And I think that's because we're not really promoting that early help seeking.
And I really regret that I didn't get help from my first deployment. Really, I should have got help, but I always said it was someone else's problem. I wasn't the problem. You're the problem. I didn't change. You changed. And it wasn't until 10, 11 when I realized that, hey, idiot, it is you. It is you that changed, and you need to flip that switch and figure that out. And but then I wasn't afforded it, so I had to keep driving forward anyway. So I just turned the switch off and kept running. But
it's interesting to me, like as I through my years in the military, especially around some of the community, the special operations folks, their mentality was always they're going to do whatever they need to do at all costs to get the mission. That's a very, very focused, population. They're doing the thing they're called to do, but they're doing it so hard and so fast with not a lot of thought really given to whatever else is going on in their lives, children, spouses, extended family. We just get locked in to something. And I think for a time for me, it was, for about 11 years on the, jumping out of airplanes was my thing. And you become sort of hyper focused on that. And that sort of focus, whatever it happens to be, has a detrimental effect on your personal relationships. Like your personal relationships will suffer, and you're going to experience things like emotional exhaustion. And you experience emotional exhaustion because you're not really acknowledging emotion at all. You're just sort of repressing things. So if you feel sad, you repress it. If you feel angry, you repress it, and that's what leads to that emotional numbing. Which when we think about the symptoms of PTSD, you have the re-experiencing. I kind of feel like this is happening again. I might have a nightmare like this is happening again, right? And then you have the avoidance symptoms, which is what I'm talking about. The avoidance or like numbing. You find a way to numb. You don't think about certain things, or you dissociate from memories and things like that. And then you have the hyper arousal symptoms, like the hypervigilance. I'm always looking over my shoulder. I'm never safe. Always got to face the door. You always got a firearm on because you never know. That same level of vigilance that they had overseas, like psychologically, they don't particularly know how to switch that off. And so I have done and do a lot of work with folks with regard to that, and just kind of do some reality testing when they feel unsafe.
Outstanding. We got a question from the audience here, and then we'll go to something we also talked about in the green room and we've talked about before. But this is from Jessen Jarrow. You had a front row seat to the struggles of elite operators dealing with PTSD and addiction. What was the turning point that convinced you to seek therapy? Thank you, Jessen Jarrow.
Yeah, I think I was just having some really dark thoughts, probably, some really dark thoughts about, self-harm and suicide. There were thoughts. I never really got to the point of, rehearsing or anything like that, or no plan or intent or anything like that. It just got really dark for me. I had a lot of really, some pretty severe relationship problems. And so everything just seemed, just dark to me. And so, but I was around this population, and I think I sort of bought into their system of like what they considered to be resilience, which I don't consider that to be resilience present day. I consider that to be sort of a little bit of a narrow-minded way of thinking, in terms of saying, okay, well, if I'm hurt, I'm not going to get help. So what got me to seek therapy is sort of the just understanding that I could be strong and vulnerable both. Right. I could be strong and vulnerable. I could be empathetic, compassionate, and I could be all these things, but I could also be strong and masculine and all of that. And I think that that's something that I think we're doing better at teaching people that you can be both, that being somebody who's emotionally intelligent doesn't make you a weak person. It actually makes you a stronger person, and it doesn't take anything away from your masculinity.
Exactly. And I know when the first time I met you, you were in front of us telling us your journey, really, and telling us a little bit of your story. You talked about two books that you use to help our brothers and sisters as they go through. I'm going to let you introduce them one at a time and tell the
Sure.
MisFitNation what they are and how they can help them.
Yeah, so the first one is really kind of dear to my heart. It's by a guy named Bruce Perry. Dr. Bruce Perry writes a book, and it's called What Happened to You. The reason I like this book is because really just the title. Oftentimes we may experience something, and you may, if you have whether it's PTSD, depression, anxiety, bipolar, any of those things, and a lot of those are a result of life experiences. They're not necessarily, because if I take two people from very, very different places and I expose them to the same psychological injury, that is the same, terrible things came into their eyes that humans aren't really designed to see. And you're like, whoa, okay, that they're going to experience some of the same things. So often we get in our head about these things and we feel shame. When you begin to feel shame, now you begin to think something's wrong with you. When really it's just what happened to you, right? And I'm kind of big on not these labels, right? And I know we're calling PTSD now PTS, and we're not really necessarily calling it a disorder. And I don't really believe in the overemphasis of diagnosing and pathology, because I think that there's no two human beings that are the same. So I really believe in treating symptoms over disorders, because I think disorders limits you as a therapist, especially because you look at this book and you're like, I have got to treat these things. I've got to treat these things. So really, the book really does do a very good job of connecting childhood experiences, so adverse childhood experiences or traumatic childhood experiences, and how they relate to whether it be combat trauma, sexual violence, domestic violence, those types of things. It connects that and helps us understand really exactly what's happening and what that connection is and what those core beliefs associated to both of those would be.
Definitely. And it's also has Oprah Winfrey on it.
Yeah, Oprah Winfrey's on there as well. Yeah. So she had a very, if you didn't know, she had a very traumatic childhood. She suffered severe childhood abuse. And so I think that he uses her, but he goes into a really, really in depth about, what it would take to get better as well, which is one of the things I really appreciate about the writing.
I thought I had the wrong one at first. Said Oprah Winfrey. Oh, there is Bruce Perry on there. It has to be the right guy.
Bruce Perry. I think he's the main contributor. I think she might be named first because she's Oprah Winfrey. I don't know.
Of course. and she published it. Harpo Publishing. So it's her people.
There you have it.
And so that one's definitely a seller. Obviously, that's on Amazon.
Right.
I think it's $14 for a hardcover, $19 for the paperback, which is usually opposite, but that works for you. And of course, if you have Audible, it's only one credit to get that as well. Then there was a second book as well.
Yeah, the second book has been around for a little while, and I think it's a pretty long read, but it's called The Body Keeps the Score. It's by a guy named Bessel van der Kolk. I think I've gone through this book 3 times. It actually helps us to connect the body and the mind. So when you're suffering mentally, right, it really does help us how to recognize some of those symptoms physically first. When we think about anxiety, when a person experiences anxiety, the first place they feel that is in their body. right? So if you feel anxious, so even you could take anger, right? Especially men will relate to that anger. They say, hey, you're a hothead. What does that mean? I'm a hothead. So a hothead, your face is hot. Your head is hot when you're angry. Right. I tell people all the time, you got to pay attention to what your body's doing. And that is the first clue. It's like an alarm, right? It's like an alarm that I shouldn't be talking or trying to solve a problem at that moment. And so, but that's something that I think that, that book does a very good job of outlining how trauma and the body are related and how the body speaks to us about the trauma and can help educate us.
Definitely. And both of those are on Amazon. That one's prices are a little different. The hardcover matches what the hardcover usually is, $26.58. A paperback, $10.86. That's about normal. And audiobook, $1 available instantly. So if you want to check it out, go ahead and you can click on audiobook right now and download it. You can listen to that instead of listen to rage music on the way to work tomorrow. We have another question from the audience. This is from Drew It For You 9. Let's see. Hope I didn't mess this up when I cut it. How do we begin to change the military culture asking for help, where asking for help is still seen as weakness, especially among leaders and NCOs?
I think you can give them, my very first answer is you can give them the stats.
Yeah.
Give them the stats, right? Give them the stats. We're losing people. So what's your threshold? Like that, I think there needs to be a real conversation about the threshold. What's the threshold and why is your system punitive in nature? Why aren't people feeling that sense of belonging and that sense of safety that they feel like it's okay to go get help? And I think that it starts at the top, clearly, right? It starts at the top. And when I was at MacDill, there was a 1-star general that would come in for treatment. And he would come in for treatment, and one of my colleagues saw him, an active duty colleague saw him, and they tried to ask him if he wanted to come through the back.
So they wouldn't.
And he said, "No, thank you. I'm going to sit out here with everyone else. I'm going to wait my turn and wait till you call my name." And that's a true leader, right? He's leading from the front. He understands his vulnerability. He's still a human being, right? It didn't matter how much rank I had or how much rank anyone else had. We're all vulnerable people. We're all vulnerable people. We all hurt. We all have pain. We all have things that we go through that sometimes we can't explain. But at the end of it, I think it's a policy issue, and I think we need the right people up on Capitol Hill talking about this stuff and saying we're not okay with this, right? I'm okay with a lot of the efforts that people are making to try to change things. There's a lot of really good nonprofits out there doing really good work, but that change needs to happen at the top. It has to start up there.
That's where it really needs to start. And advocacy helps. If you get up there and you want to be an advocate and not just talk about it, be about it, go up there to the Hill and find your local congressman, your local senator, go to their office, talk to them, and either them or their tribe, their crew that's in their office, they'll take notes. They'll see that you're hurting, and they'll take them. If you, like Doc was saying about stats, if you have stats, that paints the picture for them, and they'll see those numbers. They should already know some of these numbers, but 22 a day or 44 a day, however you look at the numbers, it's bad no matter what. 1 is bad, 22 is horrible, 44 is a catastrophe. And we need to somehow break this down and get out of it. And so that number is the highlight to build nonprofits off of.
And, I don't think there's a shortage of people who are pretty high ranking people that are taking their lives as well. Right. And what are those numbers like? And those are the decision makers. So as long as those decision makers are not understanding their own vulnerability and like that they could go too, like any one of us could go, like then we're going to be right where we are right now. But when they humanize themselves and they say, I'm a human being too. Like I have marital problems too. I don't like my kids some days, like there's got to be humans, right? You got to be humans and then show everyone else that being vulnerable is okay. Right. And the earlier you do that, the sooner you can get back to work.
Right. And like you said, with the general officer sitting in a community in population, and sitting there with airmen and tech sergeants and maybe
Yeah.
young lieutenants sitting out there with them, that shows them that, hey, the boss man's in here.
Mm-hmm.
That means this is all right for me to be here. I don't have to go
Yeah.
in there and lie to the doc and say I'm good and I just sign this paper so I can go back to work.
Mm-hmm.
I can go in there and tell him everything, and he'll still sign that paper and say, yay or nay, I can go back to work, or maybe I need another visit before I should go back to work.
Yeah,
But
we need more of those folks, and we need more of those folks. And I'd say that I'm hopeful that as the years go by, I think you're folks in their 20s, early 30s now. I think it's a little bit more normal.
Right.
So in another 20 years, hopefully those will be our GOs, and we could change the culture. Hope that answers the question.
I think it does, and I believe it's starting. Like I told you, it starts in the brigades here now. It's probably starting in the academies now too, and probably the ROTCs and the schools where they're promoting it to those young cadets and telling them, hey, look, it's all right. You're not always going to be awesome every day.
Right.
You got to know when your feeling number is not good, and maybe ask for that help, and maybe ask for that little tweak to make you push forward and have a good day, and learn what practices you can do, what tools in your tool bag you can pull out that day to make it through. And I think that we're in a way better direction than we were when me and you started.
Right, for sure. The culture's changed so much, and I think that the more that people can, say, "Oh, that's okay," and it's interesting because you resist something that could be good for you early, right? And then you suffer more later,
Right.
by not doing that. So I do think the culture needs to change. I do think that it will. I hope I'm around to see it. I hope I'm around to see, even in society, that it needs to change there as well. Because even as a civilian person, if you've had a number of mental health visits, or you've been diagnosed with a bipolar disorder, there's a lot of licenses, including mine, right, that will ask that question every 2 years when you go get your license. So it's still sort of frowned upon in other areas too. Now these are jobs that require a lot of responsibility, so I kind of understand on one side, but I think in order to destigmatize, you got to remove some of those roadblocks.
100%. And I think that's we're on the right path. And I know, just like you said, it's going to get better for the next generation of Joes and Josephines that put the uniforms on and get out there and defend our country. So, I mean, our country's birthday is tomorrow. It wouldn't be a birthday without guys and gals who have served in many wars along the way since 1776 or 75, all the way up to now. And that's a testament to it, but we have to take care of our warriors as they go through and come out of. And I think we're on the right path now, way better than 1993 when you started.
Yeah, I think you see more of like leaders getting to know people.
Yep.
And paying attention a little bit better. I sure, when I was in, and even though we were in a mental health clinic, we had some people that would struggle. And, if you make yourself available, and it doesn't take a lot, right? If you're a leader out there and you're listening, it doesn't take a lot. If you stop at somebody's desk for 5 minutes and you find out one personal thing about them, and you have a conversation with them and you let them know, hey, you matter, like you're important to the mission here, you're important to this organization, that goes a long way. So I think that, again, this is all about like leading from the front. And I think if our leaders are checking in more with people, and being kind and considerate, I think there's a time and place to be harsh, right? There's a time and place to be direct, but I feel like there's a lot of soft skills missing. A lot of hate. We don't really default to being kind, or at least courteous to people, and that that can take a person to a dark place, especially if you don't know them, you don't know where they've been or what they had through their childhood, through their adolescence, and through their high school years, or what have you. So I think there's been historically a lack of sensitivity that I think we can bring some of it into that and still maintain the same fighting force.
Definitely. And I think if you make the normalcy of the social and emotional intelligence of the leader to get to know, at least, like you said, just a little bit about every person that they interact with, it makes them not feel like a number. It makes them not just feel like a cog in the machine that they don't think they're worth it. They're just out there nugging along, and I'm going to get out after this enlistment, and because they don't care about me. But if you start to give that care, you wind up keeping good quality people in the service for a long period of time. It's once they feel like they're not getting cared for, or like you've been saying, or they feel alone, it's over. You've lost that soldier, lost that airman, lost that Marine. They're going to go back to the other destructive habits that they had before they came in.
Yeah, and I think we can talk a lot about that in terms of, why do people numb?
Yeah.
Because things hurt, right? They numb because it hurts. Like we wouldn't, people wouldn't drink alcohol to excess for decades if it didn't do something, right? It's numbing that pain. But what's happening is you're prolonging your healing in that sense, right? Because you're not really online, right? You're offline. You're not online to deal with those things. And so I think that that's part of it, is that numbing is a form of dissociation. And that also is like not even a secondary, but I also believe that is symptomatic, right? Because at the core of it, they're numbing from something else. But often in society, and we make the alcohol the problem, right? Which it is problematic, but you really don't you don't really heal the person until you understand why they're numbing, why they're disassociating.
100%. And you're basically putting a Band-Aid on something that's not really there.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and it hurts everyone, not just the person that you're putting a Band-Aid on to push them aside.
Mm-hmm.
You're hurting your whole unit, or your whole whatever. Or when they leave the military, you're hurting their community, hurting their family unit at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't get better just by pushing it aside.
No.
I'll take one more audience question here. This is from Alehouse 34 on third. What advice do you have for veterans who know they need support but fear losing their clearance, job, or respect? I think we've hit this a few times, but
that's a really good question, actually. And it's my first time, fielding it. I mean, I've heard similar things. I like to speak straight to this. I don't always think, and I'm gonna say this as a mental health provider for several years now, therapy is not for everyone. You have friends, you have family, you have people that have maybe been through things with you. I would utilize those resources, whether or not you're seeking outside resources. I think that it goes back to sort of what I said earlier about getting help early. When you want to get help, you can go to a lot of folks I don't think a lot of folks are tracking this, but you can go to the mental health clinic and you could tell them, hey, can you teach me a little bit about communicating with my spouse? Can you teach me a little bit about how to prevent from becoming depressed? Like, what is anxiety, right? What is these are things that I just kind of want to know. We don't educate ourselves on those things early enough. So if you go to seek help isn't always you're going to get a diagnosis, you're going to have an assessment, you're going to get a diagnosis, and you're going to be put on a profile. Like I think there's classes, there's things that you can take advantage of that are still a form of help. And then there's also, spiritual resources, church, and, chaplains. Obviously you can talk to the chaplain and they're not going to report it. Do they always have the same sort of, training and things like that? No, they don't, but they're a source of support. So utilize those things that until we can change these policies, ladies and gentlemen, until we can change these policies to make it completely safe for people to get help, we're going to have this issue. That's why a lot of folks will go downtown and pay cash and go get therapy too, right? That is an option. I mean, I think that if there's a safety concern, that's the caveat, though. If there's a safety concern, and you're at risk of self-harm or harming somebody else, then that wouldn't be the route to go. That monitoring is there, but utilize your resources, utilize your social resources, and if you have someone in your unit that you trust, bend their ear, ask them, hey, have you ever experienced this? What will be the consequence of this? But you don't always have to go to mental health when you're sick. You can go before that.
That's great advice right there. And I've on that point, I've heard veterans tell me that they won't call 988 because they're afraid their guns will be getting taken away.
Wow.
If they dial 988. And I try to tell them that's not going to happen. And I said, option one is for veterans, yes, but you can go anonymous at first, talk to them, and someone's going to talk to you. Or you can just go through I think they have the online portal as well. You can go on there and not say you're a veteran and just talk to a person, talk to a human. It doesn't categorize you as a veteran, and then the VA can say something, but the VA doesn't really look at that anyway. They're trying to help you in that moment. They don't care about your guns at that moment. You should care about your guns at that moment. You should know what's the problem is. It's not the gun isn't the problem. It's you are having the problem at there, and 988 isn't the problem.
And we offer, in our practice, we try to do our best to educate people too, right? Whether they're coming in for a treatment or whether they just want to know. One of the things that we got off the ground is, and trying to grow is educating spouses of folks that deal with some difficulty, especially with PTSD. There's some really interesting symptoms that people with PTSD exhibit that the spouses don't understand, and maybe sometimes they personalize those symptoms. They think that they may be the cause of it or things like that. But that's it. Psychoeducation, I think, is really the key to keeping people healthy early. It's like learning how to eat, right? You go to a dietitian or nutritionist, you go there, right? You go there, you learn how to eat, and then you eat what they tell you to eat. But why not with our mind, we treat it so much differently? But that's really what it is. Like, there's people out there that can say, hey, these are some healthy coping skills. Try this, try this, try this. So my encouragement is to get help early, but it is important to protect that clearance. But safety is paramount, and utilize the resources I mentioned.
Definitely. And you kind of touched on the More Life Center for Wellness earlier. I want you with our last 10 minutes here, tell the audience a little more about the More Life Center and the individual things that you have going on there. I think.
So More Life Center for Wellness, I said we started out as a mental health outpatient clinic. It was just one person there. It was me. And it was before I came off active duty. There was three years or so before I retired. I was like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. So I, decided I would start a practice, got a license, and was seeing folks out of a small room with 2 chairs and a table. And I just wanted to be able to reach the community as well. That I knew that this was, this area here in Tampa was the place that I was going to end up. And I was still trying to make a plan to retire. So that we started out in 2018, and then we moved to a 10 by 10, 2 10 by 10s, and now we're in a 3,000 square foot facility. So and we've got 6 therapists, a dietitian on our staff. We also have a massage therapist on our staff, and we're going to be we're slowly bringing in primary care as well. So really the idea is that we believe in a multidisciplinary approach. We believe in one team talking to one another about the needs of the person in every area, physical, mental, and also the connection, between the body and the mind. And so we have an excellent massage. So that's essentially the vision, because if you could have one team that is that has multiple skills, abilities to understand the person and talk to each other, I think that we can actually change healthcare altogether.
100%. And I know the answer to this, but do you do just in person, or do you do virtual appointments as well?
Yeah, so we do both virtual and in person. A lot of we are trying to bring back more in person. I think that people feel a little bit safer coming in person, and that human connection is just it's a little bit different, and some people really do appreciate that. While there's some people that we're happy to see online, because they might not really like coming out of the house. I think there's some people that just don't like to come out, maybe a little like agoraphobia, anxiety, those things that keep people at home and they don't want to go out. So yeah, there's both those, and our websites, morelifecenterforwellness.com, and it's the same for Facebook and Instagram, More Life Center for Wellness.
Outstanding. And is that the best place to get in contact with you personally, or is there a better way?
Yeah, so get in contact with me. You can also email admin@morelifecw.com. That's admin@morelifecw.com, or you can call our office at 813-347-8483.
And it's right there on the contact page, I believe, on the website.
Perfect.
As well. Yes, it is. It's all right there on the contact page. You can jump on there, get that information. Maybe if you want to have Doc on your show, if you're another veteran show out there, get him on there to maybe hit a different audience, or maybe more overlap audience, and get more people understanding that there is ways out there to live a better life as you move forward.
Yes, sir.
All right, Doc, we blazed through 53 minutes here as
Wow.
we ask every one of our guests right before they leave. Our final question is, what's 3 things the Misfit Nation can start doing tomorrow to be better humans?
I think first is to show up, understand that people understand how much you care about how you show up. You could have all the love in the world for somebody, but how you show up for them is all they have to know how much they matter to you. Right. I think that if you see something, and the next thing would be, if you see something that looks off about somebody, like ask them if they're okay. Right. Ask them. And, I also would say that asking them is the first step, right? But supporting them, it goes a long way. Like them understanding that they're not alone. Remember that, the thing that I've seen throughout my entire career, and reading suicide notes and all that, those things are awful. But what you come to understand is that that person felt like no one was there. That no one was there. And, and the last thing I'll say, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but it does take a lot more strength, courage, and bravery to raise your hand and say, I'm not good. I'm not okay.
Outstanding. 3 great things. Misfit Nation, take heed to them, and you will be a better person for it. And so will your family. Will reap the rewards in the end. As we head into the close here and our nation's birthday tomorrow, what kind of plans you have tomorrow, Doc? You have a family day or just relax?
I'm just going to be relaxing, with family. I think, I don't know, the weather's not going to be beach weather here. Not that we're going to go to the beach, but, it may turn into just, some movies and hanging out on the couch. We've been working hard. We're working really hard. And so, when I try to make sure that I rest on the weekends, but, I'm just excited about 4th of July. It's one of my favorite holidays. And, I really appreciate the holiday of 4th of July. It's one of my favorite. I'd rather be at the beach, but the weather's not looking like it's going to cooperate.
There's always another day for the beach. So
yes, sir.
Probably less crowded on another day than on the 4th of July anyway. Doc, do you have any last second thoughts for the Misfit Nation before we close it out and say goodnight?
I think really what I've learned, through getting to know you, Rich, thank you so much for the opportunity, is, community is important. Community is important, right? And this message is a message that it's a tough message to send, because it goes against the cultures, most of the cultures in which we were raised in or we grew up in, but understand that there's somebody there to help you. There's always somebody there to help you. There's people whose lives are dedicated to helping, and helping professionals too. If you're out there, you also need to make sure that you're getting the help that you need. I think it's difficult sometimes with the things that we hear day in and day out. So you got to have support of your own. You've got to have, a team of your own that's there to help you. But just really understanding that there's always someone there, and you're not a burden. No one is damaged goods. And there's people that want you to be well, the same way you would want others to be well.
Outstanding. Thanks again, Doc, for taking your time tonight. Misfit Nation, enjoy tomorrow. Be safe. We want to see you back Sunday night for our next show and for all of our shows, because a day tomorrow with you is 100% better than a day without you. Till next time, be humble, stay hungry, and you keep hustling, because you know who we are.
Thanks for checking us out and being a part of the Misfit Nation show. Don't forget to visit our website at themisfitnation.com. That's themisfitnation.com. Check out all our past episodes and get some of the great Misfit Nation gear for you and your family. As always, be humble, stay hungry, and keep hustling, because we are Misfit Nation. Misfit Nation.